In an ideal world, everyone would get along. You would be on the same page with your wife, your husband, your children, your colleagues, and friends. However, we live in an imperfect world. We are bound to step on each other's toes because we are imperfect. The presence of conflict does not mean you are a failure, and the absence of conflict might not determine your success in life, but how you handle conflict, constructively or respectfully, determine your success in life. Conflict sometimes gets a bad reputation, but it is not always bad in itself because it is only through conflict that we understand how our actions and inactions are affecting other people. And it is only through conflict that we are able to learn and see the need for growth. It is only through conflict that we see the opportunity for growth and also learn how to work through differences, hone our interpersonal skills and communication skills, and also develop emotional intelligence. What are the causes of conflict? There are two causes of conflict. There's poor communication and differences between people. So lack of communication or poor communication can quietly erode the peace that we enjoy. But recognizing that you might misinterpret what other people say or take a remark out of context is essential. Also, lack of communication can allow issues to fester or grow out of control. By understanding these communication pitfalls, we'll be able to make a redress by understanding what other people say, and also for us on our own side to say what we mean and to mean what we say, instead of giving people a vague idea of what we are saying. So you can become more aware. By the time we understand how we should communicate with other people, we can become more aware of our communication habits and work towards more effective communication. So the second cause of conflict is differences between people. There is bound to be friction when we have radically different personalities, values, and communication styles. And also, it is hard to reach a consensus where you are working with two or more people towards a different goal and evaluation and to evaluate ideas or different priorities. Likewise, because we have different needs, we have different goals, and understanding of some of the ideas of things we are working on might actually cause conflicts between people. And because we are working with one or more people, there's bound to be differences because we all see the world differently. Even if you grew up in the same house with people, even as siblings, sometimes you view the world differently, and so you're bound to have conflict. But as long as you're able to walk through that conflict or through those conflicts, you'll be able to have a solid relationship with one another. So now, how do you handle conflicts? What are the tips of collaborating with people you hardly get along with, maybe in your workplace or maybe just people around you, maybe your friends? What are the tips of collaborating with people that sometimes you feel like they get on your skin? The first advice is to turn inward. Check your expectations. Do you have unrealistic expectations of people? Or are you annoyed because they aren't fulfilling your expectations of who they should be or what they should do? Remember that your beliefs and perspectives are your own. Others do not have to conform to your perspective or to your beliefs. And also now the second suggestion is to check your assumptions. Are you misinterpreting the other person's words or actions? For example, maybe your husband or your wife or maybe colleagues say something to you, and then you take it out of context. Maybe they are not really saying what you are misinterpreting, or maybe your colleague is asking you about your maybe progress of your work at maybe you guys are meant to work on a particular goal and decide to ask you about the progress, and you might feel that like the other person is trying to micromanage you, but in the real sense maybe the other person is just trying to understand your progress so they will be able to manage their own workload. So it is best, if you do not understand what another person is saying, to ask them to rephrase whatever it is they are saying so you'll be able to understand them instead of just having a different idea of what they are saying. So check your assumption, and also check yourself. Sometimes we get annoyed with others because a part of them is reminding us of who we are. So it is important that we remind ourselves that we are not perfect, and neither are these other people that are getting on our nerves. And so we should understand that everyone has flaws, and so we have to be forgiving of other people and also get to understand the other person. maybe at work or even at home. Get to understand what this other person is trying to say. Treat other people the way you would want to be treated. Focus on shared goals. Maybe there are things you are working on. Focus on that shared goal instead of focusing on your own anger, or maybe focusing on your own perspective of the other person. And also communicate your needs. What are those needs that you want? What are your needs? Communicate it effectively to the other person, because people might not read your mind. They will not be able to know what you need or what it is that you are after. But when you communicate your needs effectively, people will be able to understand, and thereby getting rid of any need for conflict. And also take space when you need it. There are times when emotions are all over the place and we are angry about certain situations. It is important that when you feel upset about something, maybe at work or at home, you take some time to go out, move away from the situation, go somewhere and just cool your head, get some fresh air and take a deep breath. And when you feel you are okay to come back and address the issue, then you can come back and address the issue. But don't just sweep the issue under the carpet, especially when you know you're going to harbor unforgiveness and keep resenting the other person. So what is the best way of reacting when conflict does happen? There are different ways of reacting to conflict. Some people react by avoiding conflict. Some people appease. Some people bargain. Some compete, and some collaborate. And each and every way or each and every approach to conflict has its own time and place. So when it comes to avoiding conflict, some people just don't want to talk about it altogether. They might decide to shut down, ignore the problem, or refuse to talk about it at all, like withholding their feelings and ideas. You might avoid conflict if you are afraid of confrontation. That's why some people actually don't want to talk about conflict, and then issues keep piling up because they don't want to be confronted, because they do not understand how the other person might feel. Sometimes they become uncomfortable, and sometimes these issues come up because of our upbringing. And sometimes we grew up in places where people don't talk about situations. They keep piling issues and just keep forgetting it. So our upbringing sometimes affects how we handle issues, and that is why some people get to or tend to avoid situations. So avoidance is helpful. It's a helpful strategy when facing trivial problems, and maybe you're facing insignificant issues or issues that are inconsequential, or maybe addressing the situation might actually bring or cause violent, or maybe when you're trying to address the issue and the other person is becoming a bit violent, it is better you avoid the situation and maybe give it time before you come back and address it. And also, it is not appropriate to avoid situation. Avoiding the issue can allow the situation to fester, grow, and explode in the future. So instead of just avoiding it altogether, it is important that you give it time, but then come back at the right time, or maybe when you feel the need to, and address it. And also, avoidance is not appropriate when resentment or negative feelings may linger, or maybe when you feel confronting the issue will actually improve the situation. So instead of avoiding it altogether, come back when you feel the need to, and then addressing it so that you'll be able to improve your relationship with the person in the situation. And also, second strategy of handling conflict is by appeasing. Some people appease, where one person give into the demand of the other person. For example, they just take responsibility and agree to the other person, or give in to the other person's demands, and they just put the other person's interest ahead of theirs, and just allow the issue to just go without addressing it altogether. You will actually do yourself a disfavor if you just sweep the issue under the carpet, but at the end of the day, you still harbor unforgiveness. So there is need for addressing the issue instead of just avoiding it altogether. So in some situations, stepping in and being the bigger person and making concessions to move forward might be necessary. However, in other situations, being the martyr isn't helping anyone, mainly if it feeds into resentment or continuation of underlying issue. Because if you decide to just appease the situation and let it go, it might feed the underlying issue. Maybe in a situation where the issue is actually something that needs to be addressed, but then you just decide to appease it and let it go, but then the issue continues instead of the issue coming to an end, that other person keeps acting the way they were acting. So it is better you address it instead of just appeasing and letting it go like that. So the third approach to how some other people approach conflict is by competing. Here, one party or both parties takes an aggressive approach to getting their needs met with dealing with conflict by competing, contesting, or coercing others. In this case, someone takes a more aggressive approach to communicating their position, fulfilling their needs, or pushing their agenda, and is not open to collaboration or compromise. Instead, they view the conflict as a win or lose situation. So by all means, they want to be the ones to win, and they will not give the other person even a breathing space. They will by all means push their own agenda and not allow other people to win. The fourth way of how other people approach conflict is by bargaining. So here, both parties are willing to give up something to find a middle ground. Bargaining occurs when you deal with conflict by reaching a compromise, splitting the difference, or meeting in the middle. The situation at hand may not be the first or most ideal option for both parties, but both parties believe that the outcome is tolerable and fair. That is why they decide, okay, they are going to have a bargain and meet each other in the middle. So bargaining is ideal when not everyone can get what they want. So instead of the other person winning and the other person losing, it is better you come to a middle ground. So bargaining is appropriate when the solution is acceptable for both parties. So the last way of how people approach conflict is by collaborating, which is like the best way of dealing with conflict. So here, both parties brainstorm a new solution that meets everyone's need. True collaboration is often the goal of handling conflict. It is the true collaboration is the best way of handling conflict. It happens when each party is assertive in communicating their ideas, beliefs, and needs, and they are open to hearing the other person's ideas and beliefs. So here, everyone discusses directly and openly and listens to the other person and asks questions and also brainstorm new and alternative solutions. So collaboration actually creates a win-win outcome for everybody, for both parties. So which one is the best approach? It depends on actually the time and the place for each of them. So each and every of the approaches that I mentioned, appeasing, collaborating, competing, bargaining, and avoiding, all of them have their own place and time. But collaboration is the best approach when it comes to having a productive relationship or having a solid relationship. The best idea is to collaborate, and so both of you will have a win-win situation, or the parties involved will have a win-win solution. So these strategies will lead to solutions that is acceptable for everybody, because at the end of the day, both parties will win, because at the end of the day, the situation will be ideal for everybody. So dialogue is critical when dealing with conflict and trying to reach a win-win outcome. So dialogue opens the door to understanding and resolution. So during times of conflict, difficult conversations are often necessary. They allow you and the other party to work through issues, foster self-awareness, and make positive changes. However, people usually avoid tough conversations because they are unsure of how the other party might react. So that is why sometimes if you're not sure of how the other party or other person might react, it is best you just give time before you discuss the situation. So now, how do you handle difficult conversation? It is usually normal to feel uncomfortable or apprehensive when having a difficult conversation. Here are 4 steps to make difficult conversations easier and more productive. The first step is to prepare. Difficult conversations often involve emotions, feelings of anger, hurt, or resentment, and can hinder constructive communication. So what you should do is to prepare a difficult conversation by writing down what you would want to discuss. Whether you're talking with your colleagues or whether you're talking with your children or your husband or your wife. Instead of just meeting them and talking without preparing, and maybe you might say things out of context. Sit down, prepare what you would want to discuss by writing it down. And also clarifying what you would want to discuss in advance will actually help you stay focused on achieving your objectives, even when negative emotions arise. So as long as you stay on what you are discussing, it will actually help you to on how to be able to handle negative emotions. The second step is frame effectively. The first thing you say in difficult conversation can change the other person's interpretation of everything that follows. So start a difficult conversation by identifying the issue you want to address. Describe the issue in plain terms. Don't be vague. Just discuss it in plain terms, focusing on the facts rather than your interpretation of what you think the other person did to you or what the other person was trying to do. And also the third step is to discuss the issue. So now after you have prepared, you have framed effectively, discuss the issue, and when you're discussing the issue, stick to the issue at hand. Not issues that you have forgotten about or you decided not to address at that time it happened. Instead of bringing up those issues that happened 5-10 years ago, no, address the issue at hand. Stick to the issue at hand. Remember that you are having a discussion, not a lecture. So a two-sided conversation leaves space for both parties to express their feelings, interpretation, feedback, or disagreement. So when you're having a conversation, allow the other person to talk. Give them the benefit of the doubt, get to understand their own point of view. And also just don't force them to say what you think they should say. Allow them to air their view, to say what they think is right for them for that moment. Don't push words into people's mouth. And no name calling, just stick to the issue at hand. Also acknowledge your own shortcomings. Acknowledge your own shortcomings because we are all imperfect. You might think that, okay, because you're the one who is upset, that you have the right to be upset and also the other person is the one at fault. But people are more willing to be vulnerable after you've experienced or after you've expressed vulnerability first when you're addressing an issue. You can be vulnerable by acknowledging the role you played in the problem. Because when there is a problem, both parties actually contribute to the problem. There is no way you would say you're the only person who is right and the other person is wrong. So acknowledge your own contribution to the problem. Openly admit what you have, what can improve the situation, and also openly admit what you could have improved and what feelings may have driven your behavior. And when you go first, the other person might be willing to discuss topics and go through them. When you acknowledge your own shortcomings and your contribution to the issue, the other person might be willing to be vulnerable and actually acknowledge their own shortcomings too. And also consider the other person's point of view. Allow the other persons to talk. And then share the other person's strength before addressing their weaknesses. We all have strengths. We all have weaknesses. So when you're addressing an issue, talk about the person's strength first. You can decide to say, I appreciate how you do this or that, and then I am really grateful about how you handle situations or how you do things. And then before you go ahead to address their weaknesses, because by the time you go ahead and share their strengths first, it actually gives them the kind of make them at ease to be able to sit down and talk about the situation and bring peace to the situation. So, and then after you have done all of that, wrap things up. Don't talk endlessly. Wrap things up, summarize the goals of your conversation or the discussion, and then allow them to ask questions, maybe give feedback concerning the situation, and maybe allow them to air their own view, and then ask questions. And remember that nothing makes meaning except the meaning we attach to it. And while we cannot always change people, we can decide on how to react to their treatment. You cannot always change people, in as much as we want to have a better world and better society. We pray for change in people and even in our lives, but you cannot always change people. And as long as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. That is Romans chapter 12, verse 18. Thank you so much for taking out time to listen to this. Remain blessed.